I would say in the first instance, it's worth dismissing the kind of right-wing arguments against independence that Lorna lays out. The idea Scotland can't do this is a nonsense. If there is a mandate achieved in the parliamentary elections, then there should absolutely be a vote. And I reject entirely the idea of standing in the way of people's right to decide these questions. And so I dispense with all of those. But my concerns about this come from the fact that in the first instance, I'm a socialist, and what I'm interested in is a rupture with the system. I think it might not be the case that 100% of our problems are caused by capitalism. 90% probably, yes. And unless we find a way to create a fundamentally different political and economic system that democratizes power and wealth, we are not going to produce the kind of changes that a lot of people who aspire to independence in Scotland want. I was there in 2014 reporting on it, and I had a lot of sympathy at that time for the independence movement. My assessment on where the independence movement is in Scotland is that it's actually politically more conservative now. The Scottish National Party have been been a very strongly dominant party for a long time. It is not even like the Labour Party, where there are these broad distinctions within the party, a strong and active left, and it is a top-down corporate party with pretty bog standard middle of the road policies. It might be better on a couple of issues than the Labour Party under Keir Starmer. I think that's fair to say, but not by much. And an independence movement that is led by the SNP and then a first independence government controlled by the SNP, well, they've already told us kind of what that's going to mean. Right the way from laying out the white paper through to the kind of proposals that we have seen from the SNP administration under Nicola Sturgeon make it clear that they're not going to use the powers. They don't have no intention of using the powers that independence would grant you in order to establish a fundamentally different kind of political and economic system, whether it's on the questions of currency, whether it's on the questions of foreign policy, international relations, trade, any of the areas that really you could produce strongly anti-capitalist policies, the SNP are not interested in. And, I come from Ireland, where we've had an experience of independence. It's one I defend, partly because I have to say we have a different experience of the union in Ireland than Scotland does. Ireland, was brought into the active union after the crushing of a Republican movement in the 1798 uprising, where you ended up with, a movement that was influenced by the French Revolution being put down by force of arms. Scotland's role with the imperial project was quite different. The Scottish ruling classes, I should say, where Scotland ends up in the Union because of its own failed colonial experiments in Central America. These are not the same, and the processes by which we interacted with the imperial project were not the same either. And Ireland, even with all of the anti-colonial and more radical aspects of our independence process, which let us not forget was something that involved the mass activity of working class people, the establishment of between 1919 and 1921 of over 100 Soviets in Ireland, of workers taking over the places that they where they worked and where they lived, the involvement of the Irish Citizen Army, a workers' militia in the 1916 Rising, and all the rest of it. Despite all of that, Ireland ends up with 80 years of right-wing, consistent, bloc, hegemonic right-wing rule after independence. And it raises the question, independence. I think I understand entirely why people want to go there. I don't think there is any stronger case to say that remaining in the union is going to take us to socialism, particularly with a Labour Party led by Keir Starmer. But I think anyone who sees this as something that's clearly left-wing and going to lead you towards a much more critical relationship with the capitalist system, or a more progressive social and political environment, has got to take some of the lessons of history of other independence movements and where they've all ended up.